Beyond Seattle's skyscrapers and the dense forests of the Olympic Peninsula, there are many images tied to Washington. Even so, the state also holds the remains of communities that lost to time and economic change. Some have truly become dead monuments of wooden ruins and foundations, while others are still inhabited, yet standing on the edge of extinction. This phenomenon is not just about shrinking populations, but about how the mining, logging, and railroad industries that once built this region have now left behind silent, empty spaces. These are 15 places that preserve traces of both glory and despair in the state of Washington. For many longtime Washington residents, the town of Molson may be almost unknown. That is understandable because the town has long been dead. Located just a few miles from the Canadian border in Okanogan County, Molson is a unique historical anomaly. The town did not die just once, but twice. Founded in 1900 during the gold rush, Molson was once home to thousands of people before land ownership disputes forced residents to leave and establish New Molson not far away. Today, Molson exists as a highly cinematic open-air museum. You can see rows of wooden buildings still standing in the middle of wide grasslands. The view always feels dramatic because the structures remain remarkably intact, from the schoolhouse to the general store, offering a real picture of how life on the American frontier truly stopped in place a century ago. Next, along the roads of Lincoln County, we find the haunting site of Govan. The most striking landmark here is an old two-story school building standing alone in the middle of wide farmland. According to historical records, Govan was once a busy wheat shipping center in the early 1900s. But changes in highway routes and a major fire slowly erased the town from the map. What makes Govan even more intriguing is its darker history. The town was once the site of several unsolved murder cases, adding a cold feeling when looking at its empty buildings. Only a few people remain in the surrounding area, but the town center itself now belongs entirely to history. Meanwhile, if we are looking for the most dramatic visuals, then Monte Cristo in the Cascade Mountains is the answer. Getting there is not easy, since access is often affected by flooding. But what remains is worth the effort. In its peak years in the 1890s, the town was known as a silver mining center backed by major industrialists like John D. Rockefeller. Today, all that remains are building frames and rusting mining equipment. Its location, surrounded by snow-covered mountain peaks, creates a striking contrast between natural beauty and the failure of human ambition. Interestingly, Monte Cristo has now become a popular destination for hikers who want to experience the atmosphere of a dead town truly cut off from modern civilization. Fascinating, isn't it? There is also Wellington, a place remembered not for prosperity, but for tragedy. Located near Stevens Pass, this town was the site of the deadliest avalanche disaster in American history. The event happened in 1910 and killed 96 people. After that disaster, the town was renamed Thai in an effort to erase the negative stigma, but it was abandoned anyway. Today, you will not find many wooden buildings there, but instead massive concrete structures such as avalanche barriers and abandoned railroad tunnels. The visual atmosphere of Wellington feels heavy and deeply melancholic, a lasting reminder of how dangerous it once was to live along a transcontinental rail line. From the trauma of disaster, the story of Moncton is a little different, because this town did not die from economic collapse, but from being submerged. In 1914, The construction of the Masonry Dam near Cedar Falls caused groundwater levels to rise slowly but steadily. The residents of Moncton were forced to watch their homes gradually sink beneath the water, forming what is now known as Rattlesnake Lake. During dry seasons, when the water level drops, the remains of building foundations and old roads can sometimes still be seen emerging from the surface. This phenomenon of a sunken town is not new in American history, and in the case of Moncton, its striking visuals show how modern infrastructure can unintentionally destroy a settlement. From towns that have already become part of the past, let us move to a different point, one that is now struggling against the possibility of a similar fate. The first threatened town is Republic, which presents an ironic picture. As the county seat of Ferry County, its downtown still looks lively with historic Wild West-style buildings. But the economic data tells a different story. After the closure of the Nob Hill gold mine in 2018, Republic lost the backbone of its economy. With a poverty rate reaching nearly 25% and very limited job opportunities for younger generations, the town shows the classic signs of urban decline. Visually, Republic is very compelling to document because of its attractive downtown, set in sharp contrast with the many for sale and for rent signs hanging in the windows of shops that were once busy. The next town showing similar signs is Vader in Lewis County. It is a clear example of a town left behind by changes in transportation access. Sitting between Seattle and Portland, Vader seems trapped in the wrong moment in time. The grand old school building here is often the main visual focus because of its size, which contrasts sharply with the town's shrinking population. Many homes in Vader look neglected, with yards that are no longer cared for. The town lost its status as a center for the timber industry and railroad transport, leaving behind a quiet settlement where economic activity is barely visible. Vader is struggling to maintain its basic public services, making it one of the future ghost town candidates if there is no significant economic intervention. Meanwhile, Carbonado is a gateway into Washington's coal industry past. Unlike its neighbor Fairfax, which has already fallen into ruin, Carbonado still has permanent residents. Even so, the atmosphere is very quiet, almost too quiet. The town still has rows of uniformed company houses from the early 20th century. The old buildings and cemetery are landmarks that give the impression of a place that once had a very solid community. Even so, the warning signs here can be seen in the lack of new infrastructure growth and its dependence on tourism connected to Mount Rainier. Carbonado feels like a museum with people still living in it, where every street corner tells the story of a mining past that will never return. But what about this next town? At first glance, Toledo is a beautiful town along the Cowlitz River. Still, that beauty does not hide the fact that it is standing at a crossroads. Once an important center for river transport and timber logistics, Toledo now seems to be fighting hard to stay relevant. Its downtown, dominated by old brick architecture, offers visuals that are charming yet melancholic, especially when the shops close by late afternoon. An aging population is the main warning sign here. Without new industries moving in, Toledo is slowly becoming a commuter town that is losing its independent identity, an early stage before a town begins to be abandoned on a larger scale. From towns that carry a sense of melancholy, look at this one. Even though only a handful of residents remain, Liberty is known as one of the oldest surviving gold mining towns in the state. Located in Kittitas County, Liberty looks like a real Western movie set. Many buildings here still use their original wooden structures with very little modern renovation. Its status as a town at risk of being abandoned comes from the fact that it now feels more like a seasonal settlement. Although there are efforts to preserve its history, Liberty is highly vulnerable to total isolation if historical tourism declines. Life here depends heavily on a small community that maintains the town's gold mining heritage, but economically, it offers almost nothing else. After seeing several towns still trying to survive, let us look back at the ones that are already gone. In Lincoln County, there is one town that shows how farming can leave behind a quiet legacy. All that remains here is a small white church and a damaged school building in the middle of wheat fields. Yes, Sherman was never a large town, but it was once the center of a farming community that has now moved to larger towns because of agricultural modernization. The scene is very minimal, yet powerful. A single building on the wide horizon creates an extraordinary feeling of isolation. Unlike other ghost towns, Sherman shows that a ghost town does not always mean large ruins, but can also mean the disappearance of a community of elders with no one left to continue it. Then, moving closer to the northern border, there is a place called Chesaw, where time seems to have stopped. Interestingly, although it is labeled as one of the ghost towns, it still holds annual events like a rodeo. But aside from that, on ordinary days, the atmosphere becomes extremely quiet. Its old wooden buildings, leaning and dusty, provide striking visual texture for a story about a fading town. Regardless of its status, Chesaw is threatened with truly dying because of its very remote location. It was once a booming gold mining town, founded in the late 1890s. Now, Chesaw is only a small settlement that has mostly been left behind. There is also a town called Claquato. This ghost town was once the county seat of Lewis County before it was eventually overshadowed by the growth of Chehalis. All that remains today is the Claquato Church, built in 1858 and known as the oldest church in Washington, still standing on its original site. Yes, what is left of this town is a reminder that political decisions, such as moving a county seat, can instantly kill the future of a settlement. The view when visiting is very quiet, dominated by open fields and old graves, giving it a reflective feeling about how a town once expected to become important could end up as little more than a footnote in a history book. Next, have you ever heard of the town of Melmont? Hidden in the forest near the Carbon River, Melmont is one of the destinations for people who like hunting for ruins. Unlike better preserved ghost towns, you will not find intact buildings here. All that remains are concrete foundations, fragments of brick walls, and a collapsing bridge, all of it swallowed by moss and wild plants. Melmont itself was abandoned after its coal mines stopped being profitable in the early 1920s. Because it now sits in the middle of a green corridor, the place gives off a post-apocalyptic feeling, as if nature has completely taken back what people once built. Finally, there is Fairfax, a place that seems hard to believe was once a real town. Located very close to Carbonado and Melmont, Fairfax was once a thriving community, complete with a school, stores, and even a public swimming pool for miners. Now, as you can see, it has almost completely become forest. But for content creators, Fairfax offers interesting details such as the remains of coke ovens and the school foundations that can still be recognized among the trees. The town was fully abandoned when coal demand declined, leaving a dark void in the industrial history of Pierce County. Yes, Fairfax completes this list as a final example of the full cycle of a settlement, born from natural resources, rising to prosperity, then disappearing almost without a trace except for a few piles of cracked brick.